From the fiscal cliff to the Greek debt crisis, the whole world's got money problems, effectively in over its head in debt. Why should we care? Let's ask Martin Edwards, PhD, Associate Professor at John C. Whitehead School of Diplomacy at Seton Hall University. Thanks for taking the time with us today.
Good morning.
We hear about these things across the waters and, economic crises in other nations, but how does it resonate for this purpose here in the U.S.?
Well, that's always sort of a big question, right? How can it affect me? And if you think about it, it can affect, economic turmoil abroad can affect us through a couple of different roads. The first is through trade, right? The EU is the US's world's largest trading partner. So if we think about, the US economic recovery, one of the things we need to do is sell more goods, right? So making sure that there's viable markets abroad for those goods is important. Mm-hmm. The second way is through financial markets. Financial markets respond to turmoil, and they get skittish and they get jumpy, and interest rates go up, and it gets harder for businesses to get loans. And so that's sort of the second route by which stuff that happens overseas can sort of ripple back to the States.
We've been hearing a lot over the last couple of months about Greece.
Absolutely.
It seems on the one hand that there's some management that's going on mm-hmm. that's reducing the impact, but again, we're hearing it from a distance. We still see the protests going on over there. Is it being managed to the degree that we can all get a little more comfortable?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation. I mean, there's definitely some signs of optimism. There was a recent settlement that was negotiated between the EU, the European Central Bank, and the IMF, which allowed for the release of an additional installment of a loan to Greece, and that's conditional on a Greek plan to buy back some of its debt. And so this was something that people were watching very closely, because if Greece couldn't find people willing to sell their debt back to them, that would suggest markets didn't have confidence in this plan moving forward, and that was also a precondition for the IMF to release its share of the money. And so this buyback plan rolls into, it's going to end later today, and the early returns are actually quite positive. They had set a goal of $30 billion that they look very close to meeting.
Mm-hmm. Now, where does the U.S. sit in this big equation? You have Greece, you have the EU, and you got America across the pond, and yet there's an intricacy there.
Oh, absolutely. On one level, it seems that the U.S. is sort of taking a hands-off approach here. You don't see the president talking about this publicly, but if you look under the surface, there's actually a lot of contact going on between Washington and the various European capitals. And this always takes the form of lots of phone calls between the Treasury Secretary and the various European leaders. So Washington's role is we're obviously a very interested bystander, but we're not really taking a direct part in the negotiations. We're just trying to sort of watch it and sort of make sure that this problem gets fixed. Mm-hmm.
Is Greece the only problem that the Eurozone has to tackle right now, or are there other issues?
There are definitely other issues, and one of the issues that just popped up in the last 2 days is Italy. Italy's having elections 2 months ahead of schedule, mm-hmm. and the previous Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi, who is now facing criminal charges, is now running for office, which really spooked people because they thought, wait, the guy responsible for a lot of the problems that sort of got Italy in this pickle wants to take command of the country again. Now, he's probably not going to win the election, but it's still sort of a concern. When we have elections, it sort of raises the question about how committed politicians are to implementing reform.
Mm-hmm. And then you have Spain on the outskirts of all this.
Yeah, and Spain is kind of a watch and see. I mean, Spain doesn't really want to get into a bailout the same way that Greece is, because it doesn't want conditions. So they're going to face this issue about do we or don't we. And so they're trying to, it's kind of like avoiding going to the doctor when you're sick. You don't want to be told, I have to lose weight, I have to get my blood pressure under control. Sure. And Spain's doing the exact same thing.
And real quick, are there lessons within what's going on the European theater that the U.S. can learn from?
Well, there's we see all this squabbling in the EU, and we see squabbling in the U.S. over the fiscal cliff. And the central problem is these issues are complicated, and it's hard to say, And it's hard for politicians to turn around and tell their constituents, your taxes have got to go up,
Yeah.
or the government services that you've relied on are going to have to be cut.
Wow, those are big decisions. We'll see what happens. Always insightful. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Edwards. We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much.